Great. Thank you all for joining. I'm David Jackson or Jacko from Rooted Life, and great friend Dr. Sally Bell here, also now of Rooted Life. And yeah, we're excited for this webinar, this workshop, this talk, this practical application of the gut breath connection, which ironically was a term that Sally made up literally a few weeks ago. And we were like, that's going to be really good to talk about. And we were like, I think there'll be loads of people interested in that. And it turns out that there is, which is great. Do you want to say anything, Sally, about the inspiration for the name?
Well, obviously, a lot of people talk about the gut-brain axis, which is a massive thing that's being discussed at the moment about how our gut talks to our brain. And I think from our perspective of working together, David and I have been working in my clinic. So I'm a GP and I use lifestyle medicine and nutrition to help people recover health. And we, over the years, have been seeing how breath has really impacted many of my patients, but many with gut issues. And so as we started exploring the idea of actually how important breath is in regulating the gut and how often it's a side effect free sort of hack into, sometimes a very difficult problem to resolve when people have got gut issues. That's where it was born out of. So it's born out of us having a go and working with patients as well as understanding the science behind it. Yeah.
And just in case you hadn't seen the pictures of us, I thought I'd put a slide up with a picture of us. But yeah, as Sally alluded to, we've worked together with some clients. I've former professional rugby player, but then have delved into breath training initially to help restore my brain health and brain function after retiring 10 years ago from a brain injury where I had a seizure on the field, and it took me a long time, over a year, to get over that injury, and eventually having to realizing and coming across I need to retrain my breathing or relearn my breathing because of the stress of the impact had caused some significant changes to my breathing patterns and levels of stress and cognitive function. And then what's been really interesting is seeing how interesting, but not good, but also then being able to find really simple solutions for clients, for people that are struggling with stress from different factors, not from a brain injury, but how those stresses within our daily lives are affecting things like our breathing, things like our gut function, things like our mental state. And so I was a little bit surprised, to be honest, when a first client that Sally sent my way or referred on as part of the support that Sally was providing for this client to do some breath training. And I was like, sure, I'll happily help. And the theory being like, if I can help someone restore their breathing, can help someone reduce inflammation, reduce stress, that have a positive impact on some of the issues they might have been having around their digestion. And yeah, it was crazy how little you potentially need to do to make some really significant changes that people can experience. And what my hope for the end of this hour is you go away, one, understanding why it would be a thing that would help you, two, knowing what to do, and we'll practice a couple of things together, and then three, feeling like I've got some tools that I can literally use tonight before I go to bed, or tomorrow before I eat my breakfast, something that you'll do that would potentially be different, and you notice some of those things. So Sally's going to take over this first starting point to set the scene for us.
Fab. Thanks, David. Brilliant. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why I think gut health is important, why I think breath is important, and how it can help us with gut health. And David's going to do some practical stuff about how these things marry together, in the hope that you would have some tools to go away with to help you in your journey, of health. We always think of health as a way of life, not a destination. And it's something we constantly need to re-equipping ourselves and learning about. So I'm Dr. Sally Bell. For those of you that haven't met me, I'm a GP. So here in the UK, that's kind of a family community doctor. And I've been doing that for 24 years now. And about halfway through my career, got a bit tired of chemical medicine and trained in something called lifestyle medicine in the States. I actually did the training of functional medicine, using sort of lifestyle and our decisions around nutrition to help people recover their health. And I've been doing that sort of in a private clinic as well as in the NHS, so our health system here in the UK, which I left 18 months ago now. And on the whole now, my main focus is around education and spreading the word about what we can be doing to recover our health. And certainly when I got into this style of medicine, of kind of looking at root cause, understanding that the body is wired to heal and repair, it's wired for longevity, and how do we live by design, and using our lifestyle to help people recover health. Sort of 10 years ago, gut health wasn't really something that's spoken about. And we were just learning really at that point that the gut was more than just for digesting, which I'll explore a little bit in a moment. And this idea of gut bacteria, something called our microbiome, was starting to sort of come into the academic world. And again, sort of back then, and sort of, 10 years ago, there would be a few papers each month that was published. But now, 2023, there's thousands of papers every month, and it's becoming increasingly mainstream in terms of the understanding that gut health is sort of paramount to all health. And as I said, I'll explain a little bit more about why that is in a moment.
Proof,
now, when it
proof
comes
of that, Sally, proof is you go into somewhere like a supermarket, Sainsbury's or wherever other supermarkets are available, and you see some products that are like gut health, and I'm like,
yes,
that when it's in a supermarket, like a bog standard supermarket, it's mainstream. That's when it's made it.
Totally. So yes, it is a lot more mainstream. And in terms of breath, like for my training, it wasn't until probably 2017 or 18 that I had ever really thought about breath, which is a bit ignorant of us in sort of more traditional medicine, because you look at Chinese medicine and they have 6,000 years of kind of doing medicine, which has always included the breath and the power of the breath to heal. You have Ayurvedic medicine that again uses types of breathing and the importance around healing. You look at Buddhist practices that have always involved breathing as part of healing. And most indigenous cultures, there is the thing around breath and awareness and the importance of our healing. And then, of course, Wim Hof came on the scene a few years back and became very trendy, bringing that idea of, again, using breath to control our bodily functions. And then we have like James Nestor came on the scene with his breath book. And probably about the same time then with the oxygen advantage. So Patrick McGowan, something that David is trained in, a master coach, coaching others to help coach people. Came on the scene. And so it wasn't until then that I'd even considered that breath was important. And it was through David and talking to David and his training with the Oxygen Advantage that really caught my attention. I loved the science that Oxygen Advantage use, and started to look for it in my patients and realized that many of my patients were breathing in a dysfunctional manner. I should probably say I was breathing in a dysfunctional manner and had to learn to breathe properly and experience it for myself. And so I remember sort of 2 or 3 years ago asking David, like, I can give a few tips, but do you think you could work with some of my patients, like we mentioned? And I remember one of the first patients being somebody that had irretractable gut issues, had been on all sorts of medications, had every investigation going, had come to me really desperate. And as I sat there looking at her in clinic, I thought, oh my goodness, you aren't even using your diaphragm. I'm not sure you're breathing. And actually, so I asked David to work with her. And within, I think it was even 4 weeks, she came back to me and said, this has changed my life. I've been symptom free for the first time in many years. Now, we had to do lots of other things. I'm not saying it mended everything, but it broke into a cycle for her, and it really got my attention. And I've seen breathwork now really break into a whole host of issues that have really helped people, whether it's mental health, gut health, hormonal health. It really is a wonderful side effect free way to really tap into and get our body into a sort of position to heal. But just looking at gut, let me talk about gut, and then we'll hone in a little bit about breath within the context of looking after our gut before I hand back to David. When David interviewed me on his Instagram Live earlier this week, he talked about how our gut was really the outside of us, and he thought this was amazing. And
I still think that's amazing. Because it's inside of you. How can it be outside? But it is.
I know. And if you think of a donut, that's what it is. Like the donut being the inside of our gastrointestinal tract, and the outside of the donut being like our skin. And if you squidged it into a human shape, it really is the outside is the inside. And
I don't have poo in my donut, Sally.
Just cream, chocolate cream. And so, when we're thinking about gut, we're thinking about everything from the mouth right through to our bottom, where we poop out, our poo, and it gets, it's a wonderful system for detoxification. And when I trained in the 90s, our understanding of that incredible tube was it was all about digestion. Our body is wired for healing. It has complex mechanisms going on all of the time. It needs building blocks to do that, and it gets that from our food primarily. And they are the building blocks of our body. And so there was just this focus that it was all about digestion. But as I said, sort of 10, 15, 20 years ago, we started to understand something about what is known as the gut microbiome or gut microbiota, which, if that is a new term for you, it is the trillions and trillions of bacteria that live in our large bowel. And in part, they work as an incredible community. They love this diversity. They work together, and they in part do help with digestion. They do help with the release of certain vitamins. But we now understand that they do a whole host of other jobs, and that our gut is so much more than just about digestion and just about food. Our gut houses a huge part of something called our immunity. So our immunity is a word that we use medically for that job of defense in our body, of keeping us healthy, of sort of fighting against the viruses and the bacteria that we might get exposed to. It teaches our body about what is friend and what is foe. It helps keep us cancer-free. It's a very important part of that defense system. The majority is found in our gut, and it's closely linked to how healthy this gut microbiome is. Also, we start to understand that our mood is controlled very much by our gut. Again, in the 90s, I got told that depression and anxiety was an imbalance of hormones in our brain, our happy hormone, serotonin. But there isn't a study in the world that has ever been able to prove that. Is a theory that's very good at selling drugs. And now what we understand is actually the majority of these happy hormones are produced in our gut. Some studies between 70 to 90% of our happy hormones, and that actually becoming more mainstream, we're starting to think that issues around mood are less of a problem within our brain and more of a problem around the balance within our gut, and how absolutely critically important it is, our gut is, with our mental health. And then we know that it's also important with these metabolic diseases, so your diabetes and your obesity and your heart disease, because it seems that these gut bacteria are very important around controlling things like our sugar, our response to sugars, inflammation, our cholesterol, our blood pressure. It really is mind-blowing, as well as things like around hormonal health, and there's links there. Some people have started calling it the second brain, or maybe it is the first brain. We really don't know. There's more information going from our gut to our brain than there is from our brain to our gut. And so what is, a healthy gut? I think it's very sad in sort of Western medicine is that we seem to see, health as the absence of symptoms, if you like. So do you have a healthy gut? If you don't have bloating and tummy pain and indigestion? And does that mean your gut's healthy? The research suggests not, that actually all of these diseases I've mentioned, all of these chronic diseases, you can have an imbalance of these bacteria in our gut that are driving these diseases, even in the absence of gut issues, like I've mentioned. Now, gut issues are a massive, massive problem. Me as a family doctor, a huge part of my day will be seeing people with gut issues, particularly more prevalent in women, and often coming under a label of sort of, irritable bowel syndrome. If the doctor has worked with you to make sure there aren't other nasty things going on, like your inflammatory bowel disease or your celiac or cancer. So it is always important that you make sure, if you have these new symptoms, you work with a practitioner. But if you haven't got those, have you got a healthy gut? Difficult to say. There isn't a test yet. At the moment, we see, great interest in looking at our gut microbiome, and looking and sort of using some DNA techniques to have a look at the balance between them. But as yet, I think what we've concluded is that is so complex. While we can see patterns of sort of what we call, gut dysbiosis, where there's this imbalance that's associated with disease, we have yet to fully understand, how to correct that balance. And it is probably the most exciting field of medicine in terms of possibly the potential for therapeutic change to influence disease. But as yet, I don't think just having a look, sending your poo sample off and getting your gut microbiome sort of print out of what different types of bacteria, viruses and fungi you have, can demonstrate as yet whether you have a healthy gut. The true future lies in whether all those bacteria are doing the jobs to help you keep healthy. And at some point, we'll be able to measure, those jobs, looking at the metabolome, we call it. But we're not quite there yet. So when we consider, what can we do, to keep our gut healthy? Remembering that we are totally genetically wired for healing and health. Our body is for us. Many of us have lost confidence that our body is for us, especially if we have struggled with disease. And we lose confidence in that. And actually, life is an invitation to live by design, for how we're designed. And in my clinic, and certainly at Rooted Life, we talk about foundations that underpin health. We talk about sleep and movement. We talk about rest. We talk about connection to self, others, and nature. We talk about nutrition and how all of these things work together to underpin health. And we feel like breath is like the cement that holds it all together. And in a couple of weeks, we're putting on a webinar. It's actually paid, where we've invited the sort of award-winning nutritionalist, Dr. Lucy Williamson, to come and talk to us in more depth about how the nutritional part of eating for a healthy gut, the importance of where our food comes from and how we're connected to where our food comes from. Catherine Jackson, who is David's wife, will also be taking that deeper dive into how our stress system impacts our gut. And I am going to be talking about the gut as an emotional organ and how we can tune in to understanding what it requires of us and how we need to be looking after our emotional life for a healthy gut. So we will, if you want to join us for that, unpack that and hope to give you lots of tools on your health journey in that. It's a 2-hour thing. It will be smaller, more time for some Q&A at the end of that. But when we're thinking about, where does the breath sort of fit into this? When we think about how the gut works, we need to understand and maybe just step back a few hundred years to consider our relationship with food. So, before modern life and industrialization, we would very much have anticipated food. There would be probably hunting. There certainly would have been shopping for the real ingredients. There would be cooking and preparing food way before we got to eat it. And actually, anticipation of food is super important for preparing our gut to digest and work properly. And actually, it gets our enzymes going, just that anticipation. You know, that idea of sort of salivating when you're really hungry and that you can smell all the beautiful aromas of food. That is part of preparation of how we eat. And yet modern life so bypasses that. We're kind of eating at our computers and going through drive-throughs where there's no sense of anticipation. So your body has no idea how to get ready to eat. And then in terms of like digestion, David's going to unpack this idea of how there's two parts to our nervous system. We talk about the rest and digest. We talk about the sort of freeze and flight side of it, that stress side of it. Now, I'm not talking about stress about emotional overwhelm, although that is a sign of stress. You know, stress is just when we need to get the job done. I am in my stress zone at the moment because I'm desperately trying to pour my heart out to you and do the best job that I can, and it's serving me well. But you know, that continuous stress, you know, is negative in terms of our digestion and our gut function. Let me not talk about digestion. Let's talk about our gut function. And so, actually, our gut functions in that rest and repair state. And this is where our breath really can help, because it is an incredible tool for getting us into that place where we are in that rested state. And it's really, really important for us to understand that if we are living very stressful lives, our gut cannot function. It cannot digest. It cannot, you know, keep you virus free. It can't do all those wonderful things of keeping you disease free when you're constantly in that very stressed state. And breath is part of that David will talk about. I think also the connection between our breath, so our brain and our gut, where there's this constant communication, is happens through something called the vagus nerve, which David would touch on again, which is this long nerve that actually touches on innervating our heart and our lungs and all different parts, but also our diaphragm and our gut. And there's a word called vagus tone, which is where the vagus nerve is free to work properly, to allow this communication. And that functions when we are in that rest and digest. The vagus nerve is really potent in that side of that autonomic nervous system. And again, breath is potent for training that vagus nerve and freeing it up and helping that communication between the gut and the brain. There's a mechanical side around breath, which David's going to unpack. You know, I mentioned that patient in clinic, you know, one of the first patients that I sent to David, you know, she had an incredibly stressful, you know, few years. And as I looked at her whole, we all do it, you know, we're sitting over our computers, we forget to breathe, you know, our diaphragm is sort of cramped down, we're not using our lower ribs, we're kind of breathing up here, tap, 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 doing what we need to do. And that's great for a short term, no criticism. But when we do that long term, you know, there isn't the mechanics that allow, you know, our gut to function. And that's, you know, in her case, you know, her diaphragm was probably just clamped on her stomach, pushing all of her acid up into, you know, her chest, where she was getting incredible acid problems. So not too much acid, just acid in the wrong place. And as we got that working properly, it helped her issues around indigestion. And then yeah, so vagus nerve tone, we've talked about autonomic nervous system, we've talked about the mechanics. And then finally, like, I always say to my patients, I don't know whether you're a musician, you might not get this analogy, but when you learn the piano, you sometimes have something called a metronome. So it kind of ticks, tick, 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 tick. And depending, you know, what speed you're doing with your music, you set it at a certain speed. And if you're playing right, you never hear the metronome, you know, you're playing along. But when you start to kind of fumble a bit, you start hearing it tick, and it's telling you that you're out of sync and you're out of balance. And when our bodies have symptoms, it is trying to tell us that something is out of balance in our body. And it is trying to get our attention to draw inwards, to ask it what it needs so that we can readdress that balance. And here at Rooted Life, our whole passion is helping people, and helping us and our families learn what it is to live by design, having the tools that when we hear the metronome ticking, we know what we can do and what we can turn to that help our bodies find balance again. And breath is amazing at helping us center and helping us approach ourselves and say, what is it do I need right now? Like, our gut is an emotional organ. I'm going to talk much more in depth about that in our webinar that we're doing in a couple of weeks. But really, breath is so potent at helping us center and actually hear what our body needs for our gut to function. So breath fits within that, looking at sleep and movement and rest and nutrition. And we want to unpack that with you the next time we meet. But now I'm going to hand over to David to look at, okay, great, you've got my attention. I think gut's important. Maybe we've got other symptoms, issues with skin or hormones or our weight, and you're just stuck with knowing where to start. Then wholeheartedly follow David, follow his work, just start with breath where you're at, a few minutes a day, before you start with anything else, just to help your body get into that place of healing. So David, over to you.
Cool. Thank you, Sally. I'm just going to move that there. The challenge for me in the next half an hour is, as Sally sort of teed that up, there's so much that the breath can influence that I've got to stay on track with the gut side of things and the digestion side of things. So just very briefly on me, my background as an ex-professional rugby player had zero interest or understanding of breath or meditation or anything like that. And over the last 10 years, that was, initiated from my brain injury that ended my rugby career, eventually sort of found my way into this, in this area now. Love the work that I get to do, and the simplicity of working with the breath, but the life-changing impact it has for people is something that makes it very exciting for us all. And so there was one thing I want to just start us off with is to say that the who I'm training with Patrick McKeown from the Oxygen Advantage. I'm one of the master instructors, so I teach the certification as well. The little blurb on this is just to say that all of the techniques and the exercises that we teach with the Oxygen Advantage are based on science, and there's research studies that have been done, or they've been born out of the studies that's been done. So that nothing that we're going to teach you from a breath perspective here now is not backed by science, which just gives a lot of confidence to people to start with. And I know for myself, I was a bit like, breathing, really? Like, is that really going to help my brain function, my brain recovery? Like, is my breathing even bad? How do I even know if my breathing's bad? Like, this was me sort of 6-7 years ago. And so having something that was science-based to really give me confidence first to actually start to take a deeper dive into it is, I think, has been really beneficial. I'm sure it'll be lots of us in a similar position. But just the first thing we're going to do, before I tell you anything about breathing, we're just going to get a very simple assessment of the speed at which you're breathing. It's one parameter of our breath. It's not the only parameter, but it's one parameter, and it's the simplest thing possibly to get 200 odd people to do all together. Okay, and it's going to give us a little bit of an insight and something we can reference back to later. So all I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to time 30 seconds on my iPhone, and you're going to observe your breathing. The only challenge is I don't want you to try and breathe well. I don't want you to try and breathe in any particular way. The only way I want you to breathe is by letting your brain and your body just do what it just does when it's on auto. So ideally, I'd do this whilst you're asleep, and I'd count your breathing when you're not thinking about it. Okay, but that'd be a bit weird if I came around everyone's house when you're asleep and all sorts of paperwork we've got to do to make that happen. So you're just going to sit and you're just going to observe your breathing whilst you're relaxed. It is not Jacko, I was breathing at 6 breaths per minute and it was all diaphragmatically perfect. Like, I want to hear what it is on auto, and you get a better parameter. You let it just happen. That makes sense? In and out is 1 breath. That's a breath cycle. That's right. So in and out is 1, in, out 2. You're just going to count. And what I would like you to do is put one hand on your upper chest and one hand below, where, not on your belly button, but below where your 2 lower ribs meet. That's where your diaphragm is. So one on the upper chest, one on below the sternum. Okay. And just observe and count your breathing. Okay. And keep a running total. Did this with someone the other day, and we got to the end and she was like, oh, I was supposed to count, like as in keep a count. I was like, yes, what do you think we were doing? Anyway, in 3, 2, 1, go. So the hands are there just to give us a bit of a guide or awareness. But in and out is 1, in, out, 2. You're just counting, observing, don't change it. But notice which hand is moving, how big the breath feels or how small it feels, and any tension you might be holding in your face or neck. And stop. Okay, that was just 30 seconds. So to get your respiratory rate for a minute, you multiply it by 2. If you're not very good at maths, you just double it. There's my joke, 1 joke for the day. If you're happy to, it's nice to put them in the chat box, not as a comparison, but just for me to get a bit of feedback. And then we're also going to do this at the end after I've taken you through a practice, and it's going to change. And then you see them coming through, and we've got things as low as maybe like 10 up to 14s and ever 16s and everything in between, because everyone's at a different state. Your number, once you multiplied it by 2, yeah, would be your respiratory rate for a minute. And what we're seeing is normal. So things like 10s, 8s, 10s up to 20s, 22s. Everyone's got their own current levels of stress within the body. Everyone's had their own different experience of what's happened today. And your breath is an indicator of how your body is doing. Your breath happens on automatic. It has this automatic function, and it's linked into other autonomic functions in the body, like our stress response, like our nervous system, like our blood pressure, like our heart rate. But with the breath, we can also take control of it. Sorry, I've just got some background noise, but everyone's yeah. So, but the thing about the breath is you can choose to do something about it. And that's what the things we're going to look at today is like, what can we actually then do? Now, we'll reference back to that number in a second. I just want to show you a couple of little bits about what we'll do, then get very practical with everything in this session. Okay. There will be 3 things that we'll touch on: the stress connection, the physical connection, and what I'm calling like the time connection or self connection. So we will look at how our breathing can influence our autonomic nervous system, and the efficiency of our breathing will dictate. One of the things it will dictate is like how fast you breathe, but also how stressed you are will be indicated or replicated or seen in the speed at which we're breathing. If you're feeling very calm and breathing very calm, your speed of your breath is not going to be up at 16, 18, 20 breaths per minute. It's going to be down at more 8, 10, 12, something like that. Sally's talked about the vagus nerve, and we'll look at how carbon dioxide can affect it, how the movement of the breath can affect it, and then how we can use the breath to create more of the relaxation response. That's the parasympathetic arm of the nervous system that Sally mentioned. The physical connection will be to do with the mechanics, and actually, like when we get the mechanics right, one of the things that the diaphragmatic breathing does is it massages the internal organs below where your stomach is. So we get an internal massage gently, literally, as we're breathing correctly, rather than more sort of tension in the upper chest and shoulders that we get through more of the vertical, more dysfunctional breathing. We get a lot of lymph is impacted by that. So in terms of the lymph system being able to help with getting rid of toxins by a better diaphragmatic breath, The vagus nerve that we've mentioned a couple of times now runs directly through the diaphragm and gets innervated and by the actual movement of the diaphragm if we're breathing correctly. They've shown in plenty of studies that stress will impact various parts of our breath. So the speed of our breathing will tend to be faster. We'll have a higher end tidal carbon dioxide levels. So you end up breathing out more carbon dioxide than you should do. And the diaphragm becomes flatter and staying under tension doesn't get the chance to actually go back and retract into the rib cage. So all these things will impact how well you breathe, and how well you breathe will impact how stressed the body is. And when the body is in a state of stress, it's less inclined to build up saliva in the mouth, and it's less inclined to send blood to the digestive organs to actually help with that gut function. And then the final bit will be, you'll notice this, that when we actually do some breath practice, we're going to create some space naturally. There's going to be some stillness. And within that, you will be able to connect to yourself. It's nice that the breath is happening within inside of us. And one thing you'll want you to look out for as we get towards the end is a buildup of saliva in the mouth as a sign of us shifting into more of that parasympathetic state. So to give you one thing is I want to give you a visualization. Visualization is, well, it's not a visualization. I want to give you a graphic. I want to show you, because this is what's happening. I mean, it's a graphic, so it's not perfect, it's not ideal, but it gives us the right idea, and also the concept that you can't see inside yourself. As humans, we also have poor proprioception of our trunk region, so it's difficult for us to feel it without some help, and I'll give us a little bit of that as we go through this. And because it's happening inside, it's even harder introspectively to be able to feel what's going on. So the lungs are up here. This is the rib cage. The diaphragm is this dome shape here. It has two hemispheres to it, left and right, that are slightly different, but we won't worry about that today. But I want you to pay attention to see how the rib cage actually expands outwardly, and looking at where the diaphragm is, and then also looking at what sort of movement we get lower down. So the rib cage expands out on the inhale and comes back together on the exhale. The diaphragm is moving down and helping push those ribs out. And then if we look lower down below, there's a lot of movement can still happen lower down, where we're getting that sort of internal massage that we were talking about. So we're going to try and create some movements like this as part of what we do in terms of the mechanics of our breathing. So we will literally try to get us into a little bit of better mechanics. And I just want to explain, if I was being inefficient at my breathing, there would be two potential things that are happening, or a mixture of the two. We took your respiratory rate, so the speed at which you were breathing. Yeah. Some people were slower, some people were faster. If your breathing is inefficient, you have to breathe more, because you're not being efficient with the oxygen that comes in and the body dealing with the carbon dioxide that comes out. Now, you've got the speed at which you're breathing, but then you've got the size of each of those two breaths. They're the two parameters that your brain is modulating on automatic. There's two different parts of the brainstem, the medulla and the pons, regulate the speed and the size of the breath accordingly. Now, if we're breathing, if we're stressed, it tends to, rather make us take big breaths, it tends to make us take faster breaths. When you breathe faster, it's more literally, there's more work for the body to do. So physically, there's actually a greater energy demand. So you will spend more. I don't know what the values are at rest, but when you're exercising, you can spend up to 25% of your energy consumption on breathing. But obviously, when you're exercising, your breathing is bigger, so it's going to be much less at rest. But there is an energy expenditure to it. There's an effort that the body's got to do to literally make you breathe. If you're having to breathe fast, it's going to spend more on that, and that's a little bit more of what I call like the background stress. And what we want to do is try to reduce the speed of our breathing to help us calm their system down. It's not rocket science. If I said, well, if you were breathing calmly, how would you feel? and everyone would say, I'd feel calm. You'd probably literally use that same word. And it is potentially as simple as that. But understanding how we do this and the correct formation of how we articulate our actual breathing, and then how we can use the breath to influence the nervous system is important. So we've got the speed, and we want us to be more efficient with that. The other side of it is the size of those breaths. You could be breathing relatively slowly, but if you're taking bigger breaths than you need to, you're still being inefficient with your breathing. You're still essentially over breathing. But there's some other tests that we do to assess that. The simplest one is the speed one. And I've done that with you today because one, because it's simple, and two, it's the one that's most closely linked to stress. So if we're breathing fast, the nervous system is more upregulated. Our breathing, every single breath you take, influences the heart rate in the nervous system. So when I take every inhale, not just me, all of us, every breath I take, it sounds like a Sting song. It is a Sting song, but every breath you take, he doesn't say this bit, your heart rate speeds up slightly. It's more sympathetic dominant. So it's more part of the stress, the fight or flight freeze response. Every exhale you do, the opposite. The heart rate slows down. We release a neurotransmitter, acetylcholine, when we extend our exhalations, and it slows down the heart rate and is more relaxation. Is part of the relaxation response, the parasympathetic of the side of the nervous system. And so that's constantly happening all the time. But when we're stressed, the body is less adaptable, less reactive. And it's about reacting appropriately is also what's important. But knowing this lets us go, okay, part of the breath that we're going to focus on to help with the relaxation response and help the nervous system calm itself down a little bit is going to be the exhalation. Okay, so the speed wise, we're going to work on slowing the breath down through the exhalation part. That's what we're going to build towards. Okay, we will do some stuff like humming. So I mentioned the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve runs, it's the 10th cranial nerve X. Makes me sound clever when I know the number of it, doesn't it? I don't know any other cranial nerves. The 10th cranial nerve is the vagus nerve, and it's the longest nerve in the body. Sally's mentioned it runs directly through the diaphragm. So when we do some diaphragmatic breathing in a second, you're going to be innervating the vagus nerve. You're also going to be massaging those internal organs below. When you hum, now I'm pretty good at humming because I've practiced, but I'm not a world-class hummer. But just anyone that hums, you automatically extend your exhale. And by extending your exhale, you're getting that down regulation of the nervous system, that relaxation response. The other thing about the humming is it creates vibrations. The vagus nerve runs through your voice box, and when you create those humming noises, the vibrations innervate the vagus nerve. So we're increasing vagal tone through the humming. The diaphragmatic breathing is going to help with the vagus activation. By slowing down the exhalation, we're getting that relaxation response. And then overall, if we can slightly reduce the total volume of air that we're breathing, so yes, slowing the breath down, but try to resist taking big breaths when you do slow it down, helps to keep a little bit more carbon dioxide within the body. And carbon dioxide is the catalyst that allows oxygen to be released into red blood cells. That helps you with the efficiency of your breathing because it gets into the tissues more easily, more efficiently. And carbon dioxide helps with circulation, so it will help with that blood supply. And then it also influences blood pressure and vagal tone. So carbon dioxide is not this waste gas that we just need to be getting out all the time. It's actually it's for another whole, there's a whole breath session on that, but rest assured, we're going to try to breathe the total amount of air. We're just going to try and reduce the speed and resist the urge to breathe any bigger breaths is going to be my encouragement. We'll use the humming to slow the exhalations down. That's going to help to innervate the vagus nerve and to help lower your heart rate and create this relaxation response. You're going to look out for saliva building up in the mouth. Yeah, some of you will be drooling by the end of it potentially. Okay, so that's where we're going to go. Now, the mechanics wise, I'm going to just give us a little whistle stop tour to get you feeling the mechanics, and then we're going to drop into that practice where we use the slowing down of the breath. I'm just going to guide you, and we're going to bring in some humming towards the end. Okay, does that sound all right? So I am just going to adjust my camera. And I'm gonna stand up. I was like umming and ahhing whether people want to stand up. Let's stand up because it's a little bit. different standing up, and also just get you moving a little bit. Okay, so when you stand up, you're going to allow yourself to basically get acquainted with your rib cage. Okay. Well, someone's asked a question about the nose in the chat box. We'll get to that. We're going to work here first, and I'm going to finish off by coming up towards the face. Now, if you don't have to lift everything up, but look, I'm showing you my rib on one side. Look at my rib on the other. I want you to be aware of, and with your own hands, with your own body, feel. You don't have to show me on your camera, but feel where those ribs are, the line that they make. We call the angle that those two lower ribs make with your sternum, your breastplate, the infrasternal angle. When you breathe in, as you saw on that animation, it's supposed to widen. So the ribs are literally supposed to move and open up. When the ribs expand out laterally, we have some movement to the outside. They go all the way around into your back, so we should feel a three-dimensional expansion, but it's a widening here. That creates space for the diaphragm. It's on the diaphragm attaches. You saw it as that big dome. It attaches literally on where those ribs are. When you breathe in, the diaphragm's being pulled down and flattening out as the rib cage expands out. That's the diaphragmatic breath that we're looking to achieve. Okay. You will have greater success nasal breathing connected to your diaphragm than your mouth breathing. Your mouth breathing, if you open your mouth and take a quick breath in, see what happens? Your chest goes up vertically. Very little resistance through the mouth. There's a number of other reasons why we don't use the mouth, but very little resistance through the mouth. And the breath becomes in very quick. When it's quick, it's shallow, not deep. Okay. And also don't forget, deep doesn't mean big. I can take a deep breath. You saw some small movement. It was a small breath, but it was deep in terms of it being diaphragmatic. The size of your breath needs to be related to the metabolic demands of your activity. I'm not doing anything. I'm just standing here, so my breath should be small. Okay. If your breath is big when it doesn't need to be, that's more stress on the system. That's going to impact the gut and our digestion. Okay. So you're going to take your hands and you can put them on the outside of your ribs. And you're going to try to, with your mouth closed, you're going to try and breathe in through the nose. And as you breathe in, as in air coming in, not sucking your belly in, as you breathe in, you're going to try and make your ribs move out to the sides with your inhale. And then when you exhale, you want to feel them move back in. Now, some people, you'll put your hands there and you're not used to using your diaphragm and you'll go like this. Okay, so a few little things to help. Number one, relax the shoulders. And when your hands are like this, often people rank the shoulders up. Push your elbows down gently and just wiggle the neck, wiggle the shoulders, relax. Okay. The other thing, take your hands and rub all of the skin around where the ribs are and where the diaphragm is. Rub them onto the sides, even all the way around the back, and make some rings, some nice rings around. Ring, 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 ring. And then let go. Don't put your hands back on yet. Let go and just feel the skin feels like it's fizzing, buzzing, like you can feel, without touching, you can feel that skin. As you take a breath in quietly and gently through the nose, try and just feel where you're rubbing. Try to feel that area expanding. And as you breathe out and relax, feeling it coming back in. There's tons of thousands of sensory receptors in your skin that respond to touch. Just by touching that area, you help heighten your brain's awareness of it. Okay, an internal connection that's really helpful to get. The diaphragm attaches where these ribs meet. Okay, so I'm going to place my hand and point to it. I'm going to close to the camera, point to here. I'll do a little bit silent so you can see it. I'm going to take a breath in and out, and then I'm going to hold my breath so no air can come in. So I'm trapping air. No air can come in, but I'm going to try and breathe in. You see that? When I try and breathe in, my diaphragm wants to pull down and flatten out, but it can't because I'm not letting any air in. It's not a strong breath hold or anything like that, but it contracts isometrically. It gives me a great connection to the diaphragm. Again, if you try and do this, you might go with your shoulders because you're used to breathing up here. So relax the shoulders. Intention is coming from down here. So with your fingers, you can touch this area. You take a breath, try this, take a breath in, take a breath out, pinch the nose and hold the breath, but try to breathe in and try to feel the movement coming from the diaphragm. It can feel a bit strange, it's deep inside, but that's your diaphragm trying to contract, and then you can sit back down. That's your diaphragm trying to contract, but you're not letting any air in, so it can't move. So it like has a bit of a spasm, but it helps you connect neurons to your diaphragm. Okay, so with that in mind, as you're sat down now, because we're going to do the practice sat down, because typically this will be something that would be quite nice to do before you eat a meal, just for a couple of minutes. You're going to, not this whole process, but you're going to just do this little practice. Okay, so imagine we're sat down, or no, sorry, be sat down, but we can imagine there's some food in front of us. Your hands are going to go on the outside of your ribs like they were before. Just to give you some feedback, I want you to imagine you were doing that, what we call blocked inhale, but just let the air come in. And then just see whether gently you can get, let's change my camera, you can get the ribs gently moving out, feeling that diaphragm gently moving down. And then when you exhale, it coming gently back together. Okay. And then just feel that connection. These are little tools. Use your hands, do the blocked inhalation. Anytime you're like, are my ribs actually moving outward or not? Am I actually connecting to my diaphragm or not? Blocked inhalation lets you feel that diaphragm. The hands let you feel some external feedback on the skin to actually know, am I actually getting this lateral expansion of the lower rib cage? And can I feel that diaphragm connection? You know, if I said tense your bicep, you could all feel your bicep. When I say tense your diaphragm, it's hard to know what does that feel like. It contracts on the inhale. You do a blocked inhale, you feel that contraction, and then just relax and let yourself. So take a couple of breaths now where your hands aren't on your ribs, but I want your attention to be on the internal diaphragm connection and then the external movement of the ribs. So as you breathe in, ribs move out, diaphragm gently moves down. Okay, and then we'll come to this important portion, your head, your face. Okay, keep that connection to the diaphragm on the inside and the ribs on the outside. So when you breathe in, diaphragm's gently moving down, ribs are gently widening, and when you exhale, they come back together and the diaphragm goes back up. But also pay a little bit of attention to your face. Okay, I want you to make sure your jaw's relaxed, so you can either grab it, give it a bit of a wiggle. We want the jaw to be relaxed. Lips are going to be softly together, but gently, so that the teeth aren't touching. That's also important for the fifth cranial nerve. I told you I didn't know any others. I know that one. I don't know what that one's called. But it's important the teeth aren't touching. The tongue goes to the roof of the mouth behind the front teeth, and not like hard pushing it up, but resting at the top of the palate. Okay, and then with the mouth softly together, the holes you're going to use in the middle of your face is going to be your nose. And rather than breathing up your nose, you're going to think about breathing into your face. Because when you think about breathing up your nose, it tends to make the rest of the breath be vertical. Whereas when you breathe into the face, actually the airway, if anyone's seen my weird video I do, the airway goes back into the face and obviously down, it doesn't go up. So when you think about breathing into the face, you utilize those horizontal canals behind the back of the nose. And when you breathe into the face, you'll feel more expansion, as we were trying to get from those lower ribs. Okay, so have all that happening at the same time. Connection to the diaphragm on the inside, moving gently down. Externally, the rib cage expanding out laterally. And then jaws relaxed, lips together, teeth not touching, tongues to the roof of the mouth. As you breathe into the face, you feel the diaphragm gently moving down and the rib cage expanding out. So just take a couple of breaths, noticing that relationship between the airflow coming into the face, your tongue position, your teeth not touching. As the air's coming in, I feel gentle movement down of the diaphragm internally, then more on the outside, rib cage gently expanding. But as you're creating that nice diaphragmatic breath, you're pulling air into the lower portions of the lungs, where the most amount of blood sits and the greatest density of alveoli is. So it's more efficient. It's going to feel nice, and it will be easier to breathe more gently, calmer, and in this relaxed state. So with all those things at play, just start to listen to your breath. Listen to the sound it makes on the way in and on the way out. If it's already quiet, can you actually make the breath silent on the way in and silent on the way out? Notice also the airflow in the nose, just feeling the air in the nostrils as it's coming in to the face. And then you're going to keep the breath quiet, ideally silent on the inhale. And then just think about relaxing on your exhale. And notice that as you've made the breath quieter or silent, one, it's slower in order for it to be silent. And two, the movements of the breath start to become more gentle. And then I want you to keep the inhale silent, but on the exhale, you're going to hum. Whatever length of hum is up to you. Don't force it so that it affects your inhale. Your parameters, keep the inhale silent, hum on the exhale. However long it needs to be, don't force it, otherwise it'll interrupt your inhale. Keep the inhale silent, soft and relaxed, and resist the urge to take a big breath. It's just low and diaphragmatic and humming on the exhale. The body might offer you just a nice natural pause at the end of the exhalation. If it does, just enjoy the stillness of that pause, but don't force it, don't try to create it, let it happen. And then commence. Inhale, soft, gentle, relaxed and silent. Keep with that accent, extending exhale with the hum. The silent, soft breath in. Notice the more you do it, the more you hum, the more you relax. And then the slower that breath tends to become, keeping it soft, silent and relaxed on the inhale. But each exhale just gets slightly longer. Couple more breaths. Silent in, resist the urge to breathe any bigger. Hum on the way out. As you take this last round, if you haven't done already, have a swallow as you take that last round of breath, and just notice level of saliva in the mouth. And then we will just let your breathing return to normal, and I'll just take 30 seconds to count your breathing again, just to assess it compared to before. And I'll look for some feedback in the chat box, and we'll answer any questions that people obviously have. So I'm just going to set the timer again. 30 seconds. Just observe, see what's natural, see what's natural, see what the automation is like. You affect the respiratory center in the brainstem with just 1 minute of good breathing. Okay, and you should hopefully notice this. So hands, one on the chest, one below, as we were before. Same setup as you were. In and out is one breath. And so in 3, 2, 1, just counting the breaths. In, then out is 1. With your hands, can you notice the difference in movement compared to before? The counting is going to give you an idea about the speed, but the size of the breath, does it feel gentler or smaller? And how much more relaxed do you potentially feel in your face and your shoulders? And stop. Okay, take that number, multiply it by 2 or double it, and just compare it. If you're happy to, in the chat box, compare it. Don't write one number, but don't stop. Don't write one number, because I'm not going to be able to look back and see Zoe Harland. I don't know what you were before. You say you're 6 now. What were you before? And what was it originally? Someone was in it. What was it originally, and what's it come down to now? Okay. And those of us that were, say, like 12 and above, and I just seen someone was 20 and then changed to 6 now. How are we feeling? Give us some things in the extra chat box of like, oh, wait a second, because all the numbers are coming, so it's just going to get lost. But wait a second to input your thing. But if you feel that down regulation, do you notice more saliva in the mouth? Do you feel more relaxed? And yes, it's evening here in the UK. You might feel sleepy. It's great to do that down regulation before you go to bed at night. But equally, you don't have to do it as prolonged as that. A little bit of that, maybe it's 1 minute. I get the saliva now with practice. I get the saliva now in my mouth within, say, 2 or 3 breaths. So I can sit in front of with your food in front of you and actually just get the breath quiet, do a few hums, and then you don't have to do the humming. You could just, the people around you don't want to make any noise, just extend your exhale. But the humming is good for the vagus nerve. And once the saliva is built up in the mouth, that's your cue to say, like, okay, tick, I'm not in stress state anymore. I'm in parasympathetic. That's the relaxation response. My body is ready to start this digestion process. So Simon, relax and lots of saliva. Yeah. So you're feeling that down regulation effect, and you'll have noticed that your breathing rate has come down. Do we appreciate that you must be breathing more efficiently now, because you weren't forcing yourself to breathe less. Your body was doing it naturally when we set up the conditions and just gave it the right cues to breathe slower and potentially less. Does the breath feel smaller at the end then, as well as slower? We only measured the speed, and I just gave you your hands to, it's a subjective feedback.
So yeah, Jacko, I can feed you some questions from earlier.
Can I do tongue to the roof of the mouth one?
Sorry?
Can I just cover one off Sarah Barker?
Yeah.
Sarah, why tongue to the roof of the mouth? In yoga, the message is always to remove the tongue from the roof of the mouth. So the tongue to the roof of the mouth is because, this is going to sound quite crude, that's where it's meant to be. It is as simple as that. And some of the reasons why it's meant to be there, it helps keep the airway clear. It helps stabilize the neck. It's just where it's meant to be. I'm not saying your yoga teacher is wrong, but what I'm saying is they might not be right by telling you to get your tongue off the roof of the mouth, or they might be doing it. I'm being cheeky. No pun intended, cheeky mouth. They might be getting you to do a particular type of breathing exercise that they want you to do something else with your tongue. But generally speaking, the place to put your tongue is in the roof of the mouth.
Fab. So Nikki Mansfield's asked a question about how does this link with the gut? Is it that being in this parasympathetic state will aid digestion? Yes, Nikki. Like,
I didn't do a good enough job if I didn't explain that. There you go.
The whole point of the power of the breath is it gets us into that parasympathetic nervous system, as well as improve the communication between the gut and the brain, which is really important for all of health. And actually saliva is a sign that you're ready to kind of digest, and so it's a sign that you're ready to eat. And so it's just doing 2 or 3 breaths and maybe even practicing a bit of gratitude with your food before you eat can really get your body in that state to improve gut function in every way. Brilliant. So there was a question from Tia about breath holding. Is this beneficial? For example, like box breathing, would you use it in breath training?
You can use box breathing. I was talking on a podcast earlier today where there was, take box breathing, 4 in, hold for 4, 4 out, hold for 4. Take even breathing, 5 in, 5 out, or people might have heard of 4 in, 6 out, or you might have heard of 4, 7, 8, which is like 4, hold, and then exhale. And so all of those things are dictating the speed of your breathing, and they're slowing your breathing down, because in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4, that's 16 seconds for one whole breath. But what it doesn't account for is what's the size of the breath that you're taking? So playing and understanding the speed is one half of breathing. The size of the breath that you're taking is important, and you can still over breathe even if you're taking even if you're breathing slowly, and the mechanics of your breathing are also very important. So the answer is it depends. Like box breathing is great, yes, but depending on the size of the breath you're taking, you could still be over breathing, and your mechanics could still be really poor, and therefore then it's not the best exercise for someone essentially to do.
And breath holding, David, there was a question, is breath holding a helpful exercise? Do you use that?
Breath holding is one of the things that we teach. Everything from little pauses that are maybe only like 1, 2, or 3 seconds, a bit like box breathing, up to actually challenging the body to keep carbon dioxide in and resist taking a breath in and resist breathing the carbon dioxide out, to build up someone's tolerance and sensitivity, or improve their sensitivity and build up their tolerance of carbon dioxide. But it's a stressor on the body. So if with any of Sally's clients that were struggling with in clinic, that were struggling with stress and digestive issues, we didn't do breath holds that stressed them, because we're adding stress on top of stress. Sally mentioned like the Wim Hof method. That as well is the series of hyperventilation is a stressor on the body. Understanding stresses can be good, and understanding how much stress that starts to become an individual requirement. And what's important, I believe, and we believe, is that when you're doing something, you know what it is that you're doing. You're not just doing it because someone's said do it, or you've watched a video of someone else doing it. It's, what does my body need right now? Does it need like a stressor, or does it need a down regulator? And choose the appropriate thing. The chances are, if you are, some people don't respond well to some of the stressed breathing, hence why I've just done with over 200 people here, just gentle breaths in with the diaphragmatic breathing humming on the way out, because there is nobody that won't respond positively to that.
So we just had a question about taping from Kirsty, taping your breath at your mouth at night. I do it. Yeah, love it.
I encourage all my clients to take their mouth at night, unless you know for sure that you don't mouth breathe at night.
Brilliant. There was a question when people were talking about moving the diaphragm, how they felt their tummy was kind of going out. Was that okay? Should we see our tummy moving? So
like, you're going to get some movement of your tummy area, but if your movement, like if I put my hands on my ribs and I just get like the breath, my stomach just going forwards, I'm then not actually getting articulation of the rib cage. And so belly breathing potentially can lead you to, yes, you won't be upper chest breathing if you've been taught belly breathing, but you might not actually be breathing functionally correctly in terms of the rib cage articulation laterally outwards and the correct movement of the diaphragm. It's not a forward and backwards motion, but there will be some movement as it expands, but we do want to feel the ribs moving out laterally.
Brilliant.
A little bit of practice and you'll get it.
Brilliant. Okay, so I mean, we've gone over our time now, David. There are lots of questions, but I know, just tell us a little bit about how they can connect with you, and maybe also we're going to take this even deeper, aren't we, in a couple of weeks' time for those that want to connect with us. So we will go deeper into the breath work and the techniques of the breath work on this webinar that I think David's just about to put up. But also, like, David has another pro breath work. What's your Instagram label, just for people to join you there?
So my Instagram is jacko.david.jackson. Website for, or if you want like some really like specific just breath, probreathwork.com. There's an app available on Apple and on Android. There's 2 free courses. One is Foundations of Breathing. That's a free course. And my other free course on there is Breathwork for Stress and Anxiety. So,
if they join you on Instagram as well, you do a weekly live thing where
tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. tomorrow morning.
So, you know, some of these questions that we haven't got to that are great questions. And actually, if you keep joining each week, what I found, certainly in my own experience, I pick up new things every time. I remember the moment where I stopped holding my tummy in. Like I'd been told for years that you had to have a 6-pack, and so you had to hold it in all the time. It was a revelation when I finally let it out and started to breathe properly.
Out. Yeah.
So it's just things like that, that the whole point of these things is signposting you to people where you can keep learning with and journeying with, so to connect you there. And then we will, in our email out to you that's going to show you the link to the recording, we'll also send you a link to this event that we're going to be hosting. It's going to be online. As I said, we're having award-winning nutritionist, great friend and colleague, Dr. Lucy Williamson, who is going to be coming to unpack, you know, how can we look after our gut from a nutrition point of view, and even exploring about how our food is grown and our connection to the land. We will have Catherine Jackson, again, taking breath deeper, but also, you know, really how to harness that rest and digest side of life so that our gut can function. I will be sort of overseeing it, but also talking about our gut as an emotional organ and how we can be listening to our body and taking that bit deeper. It's usually £49, but we've given you a code, Rooted Life 29, which will make it £29. And with that, you will also get the recording and lots of resources too. We have an ebook on gut health and lots of bits and pieces from recipes and stuff from Lucy as well that we'll send out. So we hope you can join us for that. It's been absolutely super. If you want to connect me on Instagram, I'm at Dr. Sally Bell, and we work together at Rooted Life. Do you want to pop the handle for Rooted Life as well? So you can get a hold of us there. Our passion is just to journey with you, you know, over these weeks and months and decades to help, you know, realize your potential and live the lives that you want to. And we're always learning from each other. So it's a joy. Thank you, David. Thanks for everybody that has joined tonight. It's been amazing. What an international affair. What a joy from our little houses in the UK.
Yeah, thank you all for joining. So I'll send the recording, but just needs to download and upload, and then I'll send that out with links to the couple of the websites that we mentioned, the Rooted Life, the Pro Breathwork, Sally's Instagram, and my Instagram. If you want to join 7 a.m, I do every Tuesday morning. So that happens to be tomorrow. It's a good time, isn't it? So but it depends if you're up at that time or not, but we do a bit of breath meditation. And someone's asking, the recording will be available if you can't make the 7th of March event, but you want the recording and all the resources. If you sign up for it, use the code RootedLife29, you'll get all that sent through.
Amazing. Great. So recording over.
Right, let me stop